Welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. After learning a ton about kidney stones and helping people prevent stones at the University of Chicago, I was fed up with all the terrible advice people were finding online. So I decided to do something about it. The Kidney Dietitian was born. This podcast is for people who want to learn what actually works to prevent kidney stones and still enjoy life, eating, and their favorite foods. Let's dive in. Welcome to this episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, Melanie Betts, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert. And today I am so excited to have my very first guest on the podcast. I have invited Jim, one of my very favorite kidney stone nutrition school students, to chat a little bit about his kidney stone journey. So thank you so much for being on the podcast, Jim.
Well, you're quite welcome, and I am so excited to finally get to meet you after working with you for all this time.
Yes. So why don't we start with just chatting a little bit about you? Just tell us about what you do, where you live, and that sort of thing. If I remember correctly, you were traveling around the country in an RV when you took the course, but I know that you have a home. So yeah, tell us a little bit about you.
We do. I spent a career in the Army, 21 years in the Army, and retired and went to work in the financial services industry. And then ultimately we moved to Texas because of aging parents and some other reasons. We currently live just west of Houston in a suburb called Katy. We'd love to escape Texas at some point. We are no longer traveling in an RV. We did that for 2 years running and traveled across country both times. And it just became too much. So we're here. We're based out of the house now. I'm 75, married to Sandy, my wife, for 50 plus years. We've got 2 sons and 3 grandkids. I enjoy woodworking. She does quilting. And we, for the last 2 years, have been working with a organization up in New York, a nonprofit that rescues labs, Labrador retrievers. Because of the scarcity of strays up there. There are multiple strays down here.
Yeah.
We rescue them down here, place them with foster families like us, and get them healthy, get them well, and then they're adopted out.
Yeah. Do you actually do the transporting of the labs, or is there?
Sandy has driven the transport van once,
Okay.
and I will at some point. It's a all volunteer organization. So
how cool.
when we get a van full, we see who's available and launch them off.
Yeah. How cool. I didn't know you did that. Very fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, you also spent some time in one of my very favorite areas of the United States, up in the Seattle, Oregon, Washington, Northwest area.
It was while I was in the military, and we were assigned to Fort Lewis McChord Air Force Base Complex in Olympia, Washington. And when we got up there, Sandy said, I'm home. I'm not moving again. You go play Army, and when you're done playing Army, you come home. So
yeah,
the boys were entering junior high at that particular point, and Sandy is an Army brat, and so we just made the decision to try and keep them stabilized. And so I spent the rest of my career bouncing in and out of Asia and the Middle East. They stayed there, and then ultimately I was sent to Desert Storm at the tail end of my career. When I came back, I spent 1 more year, and then I retired.
Yeah. So yeah, what an amazing story! Thank you for sharing. Yeah. All right, so we'll shift gears a little bit and let's talk about kidney stones. So if you'd like, share a little bit about your history with stones. Is this something that you've dealt with your whole life, or is this relatively recent? Kind of what's going on? What's your journey been like?
Not my whole life. My mother lost a kidney, 2 kidney stones when I was 10, and she was in the hospital. She was pregnant at the time, and she was in the hospital for a year. And so we were well familiar with kidney stones in our family and whatnot. I was in my hometown in Victoria, Texas, which it's about an hour and a half away from Houston, taking care of my dad. My mom had passed away, and I was taking care of my dad. And in July of 2017, I had my first kidney stone while I was taking care of him.
Mm-hmm.
And then subsequently, 2.5 years later, October of 2019, I had my second one.
Mm-hmm.
In neither case did my urologist give me any information about how to prevent them. And so,
Even drink more water, like nothing.
I mean, I remember getting a one-page piece of paper saying, "Stay away from these foods," and it was the typical. I have calcium oxalate stones. Calcium oxalate stones,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was, stay away from almonds, stay away from spinach. The usual list.
Yeah.
Drink more water, but that was about it.
Mm-hmm.
And after the second kidney stone, I was pretty desperate. And so I spent 18 months of frustration looking around for information. And the biggest challenge was finding consistent information.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'd look at one site, you'd read one thing, and you'd find something else and read another. And I don't remember exactly how, Melanie, but somewhere in one of my internet searches, I came across your name and your credentials. And so I started just looking into it and came across your course. And that was a godsend. And so that's kind of my kidney stone story. I have not had another stone since completing the course.
Woohoo! And it's been quite some time now.
It has been. I think it was, I don't even remember, 2021, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were in one of the very first groups. So
yeah,
2 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me a bit on my 24-hour urine tests to get all of my numbers where they needed to be.
Okay.
And for a while, my urologist was seeing me every 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, they all came into the acceptable standards, and I've not had any problems since.
That's amazing. Yeah, so amazing that you haven't had a stone. Most of all, that's fantastic. So can we talk a little bit more about what I think you said there was 18 months before you came across my site and you were trying to, it seems like mostly focus on oxalate because that's basically all you were told that mattered, right? And that's so you were correct. Trying to find lists. And if I remember correctly, you and Sandy especially since she does the cooking, if I remember correctly, she just felt like there was nothing that you could eat, and you're so frustrated, and you felt like you couldn't eat a healthy diet. Really,
that's correct. I mean, initially, before the course, I had literally constructed a database based on the Harvard list of oxalate content of foods, and before every meal we started, I would sit down and figure out the oxalate content of every ingredient that we were going to have, and was trying to eat that way. Well, it was tedious, it was frustrating, it took all of the joy out of eating, and for her out of preparing. And so it was awful. By the time I found you, I was so frustrated. So you saved my life.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad that you found me, because you've learned that you don't need to do that. We do not need to be counting every single milligram of oxalate. Like, what a waste of time. And to your point, truly harmful to your mental health at some level, because that's just no way to eat. That's no way to live.
Yeah. And in looking back, the period when I was taking care of my dad, I was the sole caregiver, and I could have. Sandy and I don't normally eat terribly. I mean, pre-Melanie's course, we didn't eat terribly, but it obviously could always be improved. But when I got down there with my dad, I mean, he ate a lot of processed food, a lot of fried food, a lot of salt. I loved desserts, and it was just easier to eat what I fixed for him, and fell into that. And by the way, then my snack of choice down there, I discovered smokehouse almonds. Oh my God.
Salty almonds.
Oh, salty almonds. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was just a perfect storm.
hmm And I think, I'm sure that was also a pretty stressful time in your life, I have to imagine.
Yeah,
And there is actual data to show that stress can make kidney stones more likely as well. So I have to imagine that it's partially because when we are in a stressful situation, we maybe don't make the same food choices that we might otherwise, but your body chemistry actually changes, and makes it, for some people, a little bit more prone to stones. So there could have been, again, a perfect storm in lots of aspects of your life
yeah,
at that point in time, perhaps.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it's been it's been much better since completion of the course.
Yeah. So how is it different since you took the course?
Well,
Yeah. What is life like? What is eating like?
first of all, just becoming educated on how stones are made,
hmm
how they come to be, um, and how diet plays a part in that. The importance of the 24-hour urine test. I think some of the people in our class initially hadn't had it when they started. I think, if I remember correctly, one or two.
hmm
And that was what you kept harping on, was you've got to find out
Sound like a
what
broken
kind of
record.
stone you have.
Yeah.
And once we did, initially, I think after completing the course, still not totally comfortable on our own, and so we tended to pretty strictly follow the recipes and whatnot that you offered in the course. I
hmm
mean, they were delicious, so that really wasn't a trial. But then, little by little, we just got more adventuresome, and eventually, what we evolved to was today we follow the Mediterranean diet,
hmm
or version of it, and not
Yeah.
not strict. We do fall off the wagon for a meal or two occasionally, but pretty much the Mediterranean diet. A lot of fruits and vegetables, very limited protein. We stopped eating beef and pork. That was just a personal choice of ours.
hmm
And we still eat chicken and fish,
hmm
but very little protein. And serving of calcium at every meal,
Yeah.
of dairy at every meal,
hmm
for the calcium. And then the other thing is, being in Texas, we are extremely conscious of our fluid intake.
It's hot
And
there,
so, yeah,
from my understanding.
particularly in the summertime,
hmm
I literally go to pouring out 3 liters in a container, and I know I've got to consume not all of it, because I drink other things during the course of the day, but I've got to consume most of that container by the end of the day. And if I
Yeah.
haven't, then I'm falling behind. So
Yeah. That water
that's
is the most important thing. We can get all fancy with calcium and oxalate, but water is the most important thing for sure,
and
especially
then
if you're in a hot environment.
yeah, and then after, we didn't eat out forever. I mean, well, we were in the middle of COVID for a while, and
hmm
that shut it down. But it took us a while to venture out to restaurants, but we found out we can even do that now. We
hmm
just have to be a little more selective in our menu choices.
Yeah.
We have gotten to where we will ask in a restaurant, even if something's not on the menu, can this be substituted instead of, and more often than not, it's allowed. So
hmm
it's much more enjoyable. Life is
Yeah.
better.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love that you mentioned that you've been doing sort of a Mediterranean dietary pattern. I feel like a lot of people will probably, some red flags will be raised, and they'll think like, what, a Mediterranean diet? Doesn't that have tons of nuts and seeds and oxalate? And, what would you tell them? Or I hear a lot, sort of along the same thought pattern, people oftentimes are trying to manage a heart healthy eating pattern, which is very much like a Mediterranean eating pattern, or eating for diabetes, and when you first go down this kidney stone nutrition route, oftentimes you think, oh my gosh, there's no vegetables that I can eat. So what would you tell them, kind of how you sort of balance both of those things?
What I think, if we took anything away from your course, and I say we because it was Sandy and I took the course
Yeah.
essentially together, it was that pretty much you can eat anything, some things in moderation. And you just have to keep track of that, not let that get out of hand. And so, yes, we have nuts. I don't eat almonds. We'll substitute pecans or walnuts or something like that,
Hmm.
but not in gross amounts. And so we're just careful. We'll get kale or something instead of spinach.
Hmm.
So we make substitutions where necessary, and occasionally we'll have it.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
indulge.
I love that. And that's why I really hate these lists of foods, because it really kind of gives people the idea that they can't eat all of these foods and all of the good foods are just like a free for all. And that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad to hear that message of moderation and looking at the big picture and building healthy dietary patterns really came across, it sounds like.
And before the course, I had to give up my favorite snack, which I know is also somebody else's favorite snack, and that's popcorn.
Who might that be?
And I had virtually just given it up because of what I read. Well, now I have my popcorn. I don't salt it. I use a Mrs. Dash. She's got there's a wide variety of flavorings.
Love that.
And I have my popcorn now in moderation.
Absolutely. Popcorn is my favorite snack. If people didn't pick up on that, that is my personal favorite snack. And I like to make it on the stovetop. So, don't do the microwave stuff, but I'll make it on the stove with a little bit of canola or olive oil or something. And then I add just a little bit of salt and pepper. That's how I typically do it. But I love the Mrs. Dash idea. I'll have to try that.
If you like it with a little bit of pepper, there is one that is a Southwest Chipotle Mrs. Dash.
Oh, that does sound like it would be good on popcorn.
I don't know whether they have it all the way up where you are, but maybe so.
They probably do. I think Mrs. Dash is like worldwide, probably. Yeah. Cool. So another thing that I remember you sharing at some point along the way is so Sandy, your wife, also started changing a lot of what she ate as a result of this, because it seems that you guys were eat together, and obviously she sort of cooks for the two of you. So it sounds like it's been sort of a journey for her as well, and maybe has had some benefits for her too.
Yes, we both loved it. We both dropped some weight, and honestly, a lot of that was portion control. We were eating right, but we were also eating the right amount, and dropped a bunch of weight. Her, for whatever reason, her she was having some heart rate problems, blood pressure problems, and whatnot. And as we were on the diet for 6 months or a year or whatever, that improved for her. So it's had benefits for both of us.
Yeah. And that's what I think is so important to kind of remember, especially for people that are feeling overwhelmed with trying to combine, the kidney stone diet, even there's no one kidney stone diet, but kidney stone nutrition recommendations along with heart health or diabetes or any other condition, is that there really are way more similarities than differences. Like the sodium thing, basically all of us should be eating less salt. Like that's what's recommended in the general dietary guidelines for Americans, right? All of us should be eating more fruits and vegetables. And you should be eating fruits and vegetables with stones, despite what Dr. Google might tell you. And so other than the oxalate piece, truly all of the stuff that comes up with kidney stone nutrition is just like good nutrition that all of us should really be doing anyway. And that's very much in line with what we talk about for diabetes or high blood pressure or high cholesterol or all these different things. It really does all mesh together really quite easily, even though I know it doesn't feel like that at the beginning.
At the beginning, it doesn't. At the beginning, I can remember I think it was the second or maybe the third class when the first time you introduced a recipe to us.
Okay.
And the recipe ended up having the oxalates right at 100. And this renal dietitian is recommending that I have a meal that is almost 100 milligrams of oxalate.
Were you angry at me?
No, I was just very unsettled. I didn't understand at that point. I hadn't gotten it yet, and it took a while. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, you just talked about sodium. I don't know if you remember the term that I coined.
Of course I do. Stealth
Yeah.
sodium.
Stealth sodium, because that was a lot of my downfall. Is not, we have never, for decades, we have never cooked with or used added salt at the table. She has always found substitutes, or she used a little bit of salt when she was cooking. It was a minor amount. And so I initially, when I got my first 24-hour after the course, and my salt was still way up, I couldn't understand it. And that was when we started I think you had mentioned during one of the course interactions that things like dairy had sodium. What? And so I started looking at labels a little more closely. Well, everything has sodium.
Everything has some.
Yeah, and so I started calling it stealth sodium. You have to watch the stealth sodium, because you can get in trouble with that too.
Yes. Yeah. And that's really where, as you are implying, most of the salt comes from. Even if you're not adding salt, it's in things already. And yes, there is some in dairy. There's going to be some in breads, but there's going to be way more in other breads, and the sauces, the ketchup, the barbecue sauce, the salad dressing, things like rice-a-roni, like that is really where the bulk of the sodium is coming from. And unless you're looking for it, you probably wouldn't know how much is in there.
Yeah. And to this day, whenever I take a test, I just had one, incidentally. Just had my 24-hour urine test about 3 weeks ago. And everything's in line, perfectly in line. The one thing that is right up near the top border is sodium.
It's tough. I mean, it's tough. Yeah,
there's that stealth sodium. So.
It sneaks past you even when you're looking for it.
That's a fact.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for chatting with me. It's been so much fun. I've been asking people, so if you could describe in one word, how has your life changed after taking Kidney Stone Nutrition School? You can use a few words if you need to, but one word.
Much more relaxed.
Oh, okay.
There was, before your course, Melanie, eating had become so tense, not just for me, but for my bride, so tense. And it wasn't working, and I was getting frustrated and scared, and it is just much more relaxed, a much happier experience.
Yeah. As eating should be. Everyone deserves to enjoy eating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Jim. It's been so much fun chatting with you and seeing you after now 2 years, if you can believe it.
Yeah.
And with that, I will close this episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening in, and I hope you'll join us for the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. For more help with kidney stones, check out my website, www.thekidneydietitian.org. For more personalized help from me, check out my online course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School. VIP enrollment includes help directly from me. I can't wait to see you there and help you prevent kidney stones. Have a great day.